few seconds.
So we are live now, as I can see.
We are going to be live.
Ready to go? Okay. Hello. Good afternoon in Europe and Russia. Good morning in Western Hemisphere. Good evening, probably in the eastmost part of Eurasia, and towards the evening for our Indian colleagues. We have quite a geographically distributed panel today with people attending from all over the world to discuss a really important question of shaping the future together. We know how turbulent the times are. We know how really the debates around the future model of society are going everywhere, with COVID highlighting some of the really dark sides of political systems, for example, all over the place. And the debates that we are facing, a so-called surveillance state with a digital control from the government. This is a massive challenge for everyone. And of course, other dark trends are affecting us as well. People are concerned about losing their jobs to new wave of technologies, or being placed on remote work where they have less working guarantees, and all of these factors are threatening us. And of course, looking ahead, we also see other dark things such as climate change, biodiversity loss, and when we think about the future, always people start to talk about these negative scenarios. But future is not only dark; it also has a lot of inspiration and a lot of positive trends. And we can talk about empowerment of everyone in our society, the opportunities for new generations to really self-actualize themselves. Technologies are giving us more opportunities to connect with each other, to do more than we could do before, to really collaborate on the scales unseen with each other. And so in some regards, with these things we've been living through the last year, the COVID situation, we are entering into what we can call really a decisive decade, something that where everyone needs to engage with these changes. And the inspiration for this particular panel and everyone who is attending was that a saying from a famous system scientist who was also one of the key figures in Scout movements in the US, Bela Banathy. He said that it's unethical to design a social system without its users, or any system. So it's quite logical when we talk about telephones or airplanes, that users are being asked what do they need, or software. But when we talk about our educational systems or our cities or our political system, it's very rare to see young people participating in the debate and actively shaping it. So the question that we hold for this panel is how can we productively engage the next generation in the shaping of our society? And how can education or learning projects serve as a pathway for younger generation to be empowered and to step into this role? Because the next generation is going to be users of the future that is being shaped. So it's absolutely unethical not to engage them in the conversations about the future. We have a panel of people who actually are practicing this. and we'll like the order we will see in which order we will speak, but maybe speaking from the geographical standpoint, we have two colleagues from India representing youth empowerment projects, Ucheta from Dream a Dream and Aakash from Quest Alliance. Then we have several European colleagues. From Russia are Alexei Fedosеев and Anastasia Starostinskaya from Kruzhok movement that is built on the dialogue and the engagement of young people and adults, co-creating technologies and social innovations together. We have Kasper Nozarewski from Poland, who is one of the leaders of the future literacy approach. We have Fanny from Les Aventuriers, which is a school in France building up on engagement of young people in research and exploration. And of course, you're also doing a lot of these prototypes of innovations and solutions. And Valentina Raman from Washington, DC, who is one of the co-founders of Youth by Youth project, an amazing educational initiative where young people are teaching young people about all kinds of challenges and approaches to solving them. And you just had an amazing event. So maybe Valentina, we could begin with you and sharing how was it and what is Youth by Youth and how do you see this empowerment happening in these dialogues? You need to unmute, yes.
Thank you, Pavel, and good evening, afternoon, morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. If you could give me a thumbs up, my fellow panelists, if you see it.
All right.
Wonderful. So I'm Valentina Raman. I am, as Pavel said, one of the co-founders of Youth by Youth, a global movement for youth by youth to radically reimagine the future of education. We aim to accelerate the process of young people influencing, designing, and transforming their education systems. Today is the third day of our first ever online experience, where 140 youth activists from around the globe, 50 plus countries, 5 continents, are together collaborating around a central question. What if young people design the future of education? These are some of the young people who are weaving this experience, our fellow youth hosts. There are 20 of them who are weaving and bringing together, connecting, reflecting, radically reimagining with 140 youth activists and 60 co-creators. And they created a deep dialogue process that was designed and facilitated by them. And I want to share with you a few lessons that have surfaced from these 1.5 short days and the one last day that we have together. In their words, they see that their education challenges are shared. It's not just my country or your country, these problems are global. If I'm not in someone's shoes, I don't know the pain they're feeling. Empathy is the first step in designing a solution. The best time to plant a mahogany was 50 years ago, as it takes 50 years to grow. So the second best time to plant a mahogany is now, so we can see the seeds we plant grow in 50 years. Grades don't equate to value. Sitting in a room and taking standardized tests is not an effective measure of intelligence and should not measure human worth. Anxiety limits creativity. Our mental health and a growth mindset are necessary to learn and live to our fullest potential. Teachers should be trained in child psychology, anti-bias, and social cultural issues. School systems should share power between adults and youth. And our curriculum should be embedded in community, and its purpose should be liberation. Schools should be another home, not a hospital or an office environment, and they should have more comfortable chairs. These are the wisdoms, the learning lessons that our young people have been surfacing through the act of global solidarity, of showing up for days and days to discuss around the common purpose of education, one that does not reduce humans to a monetary value, and from the philosophy of human reductionist theory that developed our current education systems, one that does not see them as a commodity of a free market proposed for a prosperous economy, that sees them only in an economic future and not in a thriving present. So the first step of youth by youth is community. These words were from our activists that have been led and guided by our youth hosts. And these are some of the ways in which, in this only first 2 days of experience, how they are feeling from these deep dialogue sessions. I feel like I'm not alone anymore. I feel I am no longer afraid. Our experiences are so diverse, and it feels like we've known each other forever. In my whole life, I have never met these many activists, now friends and inspiration, in such a short time. These words are the beginning of the movement that is Youth by Youth. We seek to create an authentic space where we can gather as our whole selves and collaborate, enable young people through themselves to reclaim their education and have conversations on the fundamental purpose of education and radically reimagining it. The second step is youth weaving youth to connect, reflect, and radically reimagine. These are some of the tools that our young people have developed in order to share their experiences, their common challenges, worries, frustrations, and also understand complex concepts such as intersectionality and how does identity play into others' perception of themselves and their own perception on the world. These are the beginnings of seeing themselves as creators and leaders in this moment with bold audacity and humility, and helping to lead to our second step, or third step, which is adult allies and co-creators. This movement cannot be built alone, and our young people see that this is essential, that they want to see that adult allies are behind them, following their lead in revolutionizing the purpose of education. They are creating action groups currently today, as the final day is exploring what now? What now do we do with these visions, with this community, with this woven purpose? And they are asking for the support of adult allies through a petition. They believe that young people should have agency over their education and that human rights are being violated routinely, that education should be with the purpose of liberation. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says the most widely ratified, which is the most widely ratified human rights treaty, clearly states in Articles 11 and 12 that children should have the right to be heard and should be considered in policymaking regarding their education. This is clearly not the reality, and our Youth by Youth community of education activists are asking for education ministries to each have a youth council, for education policies to be systematically approved by young people prior to being implemented, and that youth councils lead and inform the solutions to the challenges intensified by COVID-19, including the widening systems of inequity and declining youth mental health. And finally, they want to ensure that schools do not have a monopoly over education, and recognizing that the out-of-school experience is essential. The community must be embedded in their learning. And so I hope that you will support their efforts, support their action groups across the world and across themes to support the transformation in education, and support their petition to put youth in charge of their own education to design our future. Thank you.
Wow. I'm astonished. Thank you very much. This is really a powerful message, and it's most important, it comes from young people themselves. So let me ask you, Valentina, a very short question just to clarify. You have indicated a number of specific tools that you have been using to catalyze this process. So I hear that you were using deep dialogue practices as adults in young adults in this process. You've been holding the space for others organizationally, and you're also kind of creating the segues for this voice to be heard in different political platforms, as I understand.
Yes. So the process began with finding our fellow young people who are leading and designing the process itself. So this began with those 20 youth hosts that we went through a learning journey ourselves in what does it mean to hold authentic space for others, and exploring different ways of collaborating through this virtual world and making it feel as if we're in the same room. And so that was the beginning of the process, was building that team. At the same time, we know that we have many youth serving organizations and allies already in our experience through my previous work at Ashoka, my co-founder Zeneb from WISE, and Jessica Spencer-Keys from 100. So we had been surfacing innovations through previous work around the world, and we knew that those were effective channels to not only disseminate this idea and invitation for other young people to join, but also start to align forces beyond young people towards this common purpose. And so now the task is that the young people that have been weaving themselves are creating action groups today to follow up from this experience of 3 days, and bring together those youth serving organizations and co-creators with their deep dialogue circles and communities of practice. So.
Thank you very much, Valentina. And actually, I wanted to connect your work with something that Sucheta is doing, because Sucheta, I'm aware that the work that Valentina and her colleagues are doing was largely inspired by your initiative called What If, where you started to propagate this idea that we can really open up a debate for a different alternative models in education. And you yourself are leading a massive youth empowerment initiative in India. So can you share on both of these and how you see the role of young people in reshaping education and maybe beyond education?
Sure. Congratulations, Valentina. I love the presentation and all the progress you've made. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I agree with everything Valentina said, and the voices and the messages and the crying need that young people are putting in front of us is very similar. I know that there are young people from Dream a Dream as well in the Youth by Youth and who are part of this conference. So maybe the perspective I could bring was how at Dream a Dream, we took the journey to understanding how young people could show us the way to build the future. At Dream a Dream, we started about 20 years back, and it was about, and we wanted to, the idea was to empower young people who especially come from vulnerable backgrounds, in this case, socioeconomically poor backgrounds, and help them overcome the impact that adversity and just poverty is having on them, and prepare them for the fast pace of change by developing their life skills. So we started with empowerment programs, working with young people, sports, arts, after school. But about 8 or 9 years into that journey, as young people built their agency, built their leadership skills, they started coming back and joining us. So we had them become 18, and they became employees of Dream a Dream. That was the first kind of penny drop moment about what that really means when young people take up what you thought you were empowering them about. Over the next 10 years, we've had young people. We have about 40% of our staff today who are young people inside, who are alumni of our program today, including leadership roles. And that changed completely how we looked at our programs, how we designed it. The young people are really the alumni of our program. They are really connected to the community, so they understand the problem in a way that I can't. But they also hold us to such a high degree of being authentic and being true to what young people need and the challenges they are facing. Even during COVID, we've had, our response to COVID was not what I would have imagined, but it really came from listening to young people. That's what the What If campaign came from. When we went into lockdown, we spent the first 15 days just getting in touch, just making sure, just to understand what was happening. And then we realized that the level of anxiety was so high. There was, of course, the COVID and the scare of it, but the economic anxiety, the examinations, school shutting down, people, their parents were losing jobs. So that's where really What If came from, because we said, this is a chance for us now to reimagine the future. And like Valentina said, that young people are telling us that these challenges are just becoming bigger and bigger, and they want to do something that can solve it systemically. So that's been our journey, where we, through leadership inside the organization itself, we have been able to design our programs that make sense to them. But as we are going forward, we are realizing that as the young people are moving out, this time through COVID, we have had a couple of our young people join politics. They just won the local elections. We know there's a girl who's considering running, almost for a citywide election. So we know that they're also infiltrating the system in terms of taking leadership positions. But that is where now we are kind of where we are thinking about the pathways, is that as young people are trying to do this, when they're trying to create this future, and they definitely have the capability and they definitely must be given the opportunity, there's so much systemic pushback that is coming, right? There's so much bias in the system. If you're a young Muslim girl from a poor family, your voice is hardly considered important, right? You don't speak good English, you don't belong in these panels. So we are realizing there's just so much systemic pushback that is coming. So where we are going and where I am going is, how can we, while we empower young people, they become part of Youth by Youth, join other nonprofits, take on this movement, can Dream a Dream help dismantle some of these systemic inequities and this pushback that is coming from the system to help them really thrive and take on the future. So that's really where I see the pathway going. While we give them voice, we must also recognize that it is people who have power, who have privilege, that are holding on, and just empowering young people will not be enough. We must ask ourselves, how are we dismantling these systems of inequities, these systems of injustice, so that they can thrive?
Yes, I can see Anastasia is putting the link in our co-created document, where we are going to also capture the insights from this session and paper in a way as a result of this conversation today, to really see what works and what we see as a kind of possible strategies for bringing empower young people to co-create the future, and also how can we do it as we're scaling up. Thank you very much, Sucheta. This is an astonishing work you are doing, and let's talk a little bit later about this idea of dismantling the systemic, let's say, inequalities. This is really important. But maybe in terms of the work being done by us as colleagues, I wanted to invite Casper to share the work on future literacies, because as we start to talk about the capacity of young people to engage in shaping the future, it is important also to give them, let's say, the tools, the proper skills for understanding the future, what drivers are there, what happens, and how can we kind of both empower and enable young people to work with the future. Casper, over to you.
Thank you, Pavel. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you, Sucheta. Wonderful introductions. It always puts me as a futurist in a rather uncomfortable position, because as futurists, we are always looking for assumptions that can be challenged, that we're looking for, traces of different systems of values or of different residues in activism, in campaigns, in goals. And it's tearing me apart sometimes, because on one hand, I feel fantastic enthusiasm and I feel enthused by what you are saying. And on the other hand, futures literacy and future studies in general, they are about asking, are we taking all perspectives into account? And this is not meant as a provocation. It's never meant as a provocation. It's meant as a liberating gesture, but also as a way of including different perspectives on the matter. And here we are sharing perhaps a value that education, or more generally speaking, learning is really important and liberating. And it has tremendous impact on their life paths, on the goals that people will set in lives, and the values they will uphold. But on the other hand, there are people out there in the world, and I don't think the voices should be completely ignored, even if I don't agree with them personally, saying that focus on education is a liberal illusion, and just believing that through education, the fates can be changed in such an inequitable world, in a world where there's so much unjustness, and it's just an illusion, it's just a dream. So how do you reconcile this? Do you even have to take the other point of view into account? The world is incredibly complex and the change is emergent. We like to work, improving the world one thing at a time, helping one person at a time, scaling up so that we can help more. But in fact, we often tend to be disrupted and surprised by things that can happen. So futures literacy, a concept that was coined by my friend, Dr. Will Miller from UNESCO, who is head of futures literacy and foresight at UNESCO, probably a decade ago, and I'm involved with this community for the last 8 years already, is a way of looking at future that is liberating both from bad preconceptions, cliches, or unjust assumptions, but also liberating those who have already ridden themselves of the bad things, liberating them also from things that come after. Trying to shift perspectives and trying different ways of using the future. Why is that important when we're talking about youth? One could say youth, working on visions of the world, perceptions and ideas of youth is a low-hanging fruit. The young people have a relatively high plasticity of their imagination, and of course they still are a considerable portion of the global population. But I think it's very important. This is what we do in futures literacy labs across the world under the banner of UNESCO, working with different organizations, really globally. But also what Teach the Future community does, and what I do locally with One Lesson About the Future, is to go out there and show and engage young people in trying out different ways of using the future. So there may be a systemic way of using the future where you can, by tweaks in the in your life strategy or in your community's fate, you can improve it. But also there has to be an understanding that emergence is a fact, that changes happen, and in this very, very complex world, what we do, what we believe to be right at this moment may yield completely contradictory results or may not work at all. And it's not meant as cutting their wings and infusing them with cynicism that has done so much bad for the world, but it's meant to as a bit of a immunization and coming to understand that when you go out there as a young person and you meet the so-called old people, the old eggheads, for instance, who seem to run the world, their view of what future is, what is possible, what is good in the future is different. And so that you do not become broken and you do not become cynical in the process, seeing how your ideals in confrontation with what the future from a normative perspective is going to be and where the focus is, so that you don't become broken. Why is it important? There's ample educational research showing that in developed countries, but increasingly in developing countries, people are leaving education being a little bit disillusioned, and having, perhaps less enthusiasm for the world than they previously had, limiting their ambition in changing the world to a very small, sometimes even egoistical perimeter, and saying, okay, I will try to arrange myself in life somehow, and then I see what happens, because then I see how the system is rigged against me. And futures literacy is a way of saying, if you learn different ways of using the future, you acquire the capacity to be free, to speak in Amartya Sen's words. Because when you can shift perspective on the future, you can instantly, get a different grip at problems that you're facing. You can reframe them, and you can reframe your own thinking, not to avoid problems, but not to focus on solving them too much, to let go of the pressure that civilization puts us on, the responsibilities that we feel, and consider if we may have other responsibilities as well. And not to take too much time, I just want to mention that it's not meant as some kind of post-structural or postmodern relativism that, everyone has a way of their own, and in fact, nothing can be said about the future. It's not this. It's just the realization that since the future cannot be predicted accurately, it's worth asking questions. It's worth trying to understand how our perceptions of the future, this, non-existent, this phantom of the future, influence what we are doing here and now. Because the belief, the assumption is, and I'm not shying away from saying that if we understand how young people see the future, how they perceive it, and how other stakeholders perceive the future, there's possibility of reconciliation of these visions. And there's possibility, if we understand, if we learn from the future, then they can take better decisions now. And I've seen it firsthand working with high school students from privileged and unprivileged backgrounds, working with students on many continents with UNESCO, that, deep down, below the layers of enthusiasm, below the sort of holding high the banner of education as a means to better the world, there is anxiety, there is uncertainty, there is risk, and we should, perhaps futures literacy comes to terms with the fact that we should embrace this all and just, admit that it's there and work with it.
Thank you very much, Kasper. And I'm really intrigued also to know how maybe members of the panel and other organizations can potentially join the movement. I understand you are also a movement, and so maybe it will be useful to give some links, or maybe just indicate where to go to reach out to you.
Okay, I think the first step would be, there was a big event by UNESCO lately called Futures Literacy Summit. So you can engage individually with different promoters, based on geography or on topics. If you go to UNESCO's event portal for the Futures Literacy Summit, and there are recordings of all the sessions, so depending on your focus, you can choose the right people, and you can connect with them directly because there's a directory of them. The Global Futures Literacy Network is not a hierarchical structured institution. It's a bit of a trans institution that is emergent. So, no one is ever too late, or no one is ever too junior or too senior to become part of this. So I think this is the best way to start. Look at the Futures Literacy Summit recordings and find the people you want to engage with. And then you are part of the Futures Literacy community globally.
Thank you. And
may I also add just one word? Yeah, you see the link of the overall document in the chat, and well, yeah, I understand that it's pretty difficult for me sometimes to put the right points there, because it's very interesting just to listen to you, and sometimes it's difficult. So just feel free to add it right now. And yeah, thank you for those who have started it. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Actually, I wanted to connect the point that Kasper was making with the work by Кружок movement and invite Alexei Fedosеев, because your big inspiration, as I know, is actually engaging young people with as future makers, and not only empower them to think about the future, but really to practice it. And Anastasia is leading this project called Practices of the Future. And Alexei, I know that the pre-concept of this is you're engaging the leaders of innovation, the cutting edge people, let's say, that solving the world's toughest problems with young people to really work on this together. But how do you do it? What is happening with Кружок movement? How do you see your future in practicing this?
Yeah, thank you, Pavel. I found that the idea presented by Kasper is pretty similar, pretty familiar for me, because when we talk about changing the future, it's so large agenda, and you cannot just talk with young people by just change something and that's all. It's not working, because you need to go deep inside into the problem and understand it better, and you need to feel that there are different positions about each problem. And that's why literacy, it's very, very good solution. I think we use a pretty different way of thinking about it, because we use games and simulations to understand the problems and discuss it. And we use projects and technological solutions created by young people to make prototypes. We are thinking about prototyping changes. We are thinking about prototyping little shifts which can move us to the situation when we can change some big problem. And I think that the main context for us is learning technologies, but learning technologies in a responsible way. When you understand that technology can change the world and can change something around you. And when we learn technologies and young people create projects, we ask them what they want to change. And this is the way how we connect this thinking about future and changing something in your local community, in your local probably fab lab or university or school, any point when you can apply your technical skills to change something around you. And I think that it is really a big problem how to change the intention of a young girl or man from just learning it to have your own, have their own power to change it. And I think that there are so different practices I hear right now how to deal with this particular problem. And this is what we can learn from each other. And yes, and especially the last example of literacy contests or discussions. I think that this is a very good way of extending different points of view and exchange with different positions. And I like this very much.
Thank you. And maybe Anastasia, you just maybe want to drop a couple of words about Practices of the Future project, because I think this is one of the kind of possible internal developments of Кружок movement to really engage with possible futures and communities around it. Anastasia?
Yeah, sorry, can you just repeat it, because I was in
the typing. I'm sorry. Yeah, I invite you to really share very briefly the Practices of the Future almanac, the idea behind it, and how you see this as one of the possible ways, so to say, of engaging young people in this future co-creation?
Yeah, sure. So we have carried out a really big research of what we call practices of the future. So these are some real communities that have the vision of the future and that are trying to change something in the real life locally right now. And we were looking for them in different spheres, in governance systems, economy, in habitats, and what we call human plus. So all the projects and technologies that are trying to make a human being more healthy and happier, and that is ready to solve those really difficult problems that we see nowadays. And we have put them on the almanac of the practices of the future, or on the Protopia map. So yeah, the link is also on the Attendify, and I will share it in the document. And we really believe that this almanac will help the youth, and not only the youth, to get inspired to see what is being done right now. So the real communities, the real topics, the real problems, and that it can help them to understand what problem is their problem, and what they really want to do in the present, and what kind of future they want to get, because it's really difficult to get a better future when you don't really understand what does it mean for you personally, and what is that better future. And so we have already tried with some kruzhoks. So the kruzhok movement is about kruzhoks, so the groups of people, children and adult communities of technical enthusiasts, and they told us that it really helps to get some reflection on what they are doing right now, and to understand where they want to go next, and maybe to also connect with some people, because we have the map of communities there too, and you can find some allies there. So we really hope that it will help our Russian school children, and also not only in Russia, just to choose their own path to the future.
Thank you. And I wanted to switch to Fanny. I know that you are doing this massive project in France, focusing on engaging young people in schools in let's say very advanced research. And I think there are a lot of similarities with what Kruzhok movement is trying to do, to bring this cutting edge sort of say skills to young people. And the idea of Saventurier, as I understand, is also about this being adventurous and entrepreneurial. So it's also very empowering, and I look forward to your sharing of how you're doing it. What is your practice?
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. It actually just started snowing here in Paris, so it's winter mood. So I'll be happy to present you Saventurier, École de la Recherche, and what we do and how we do it. And indeed, there is a lot of connection with like all your presentation and what you also do. So it's very interesting to be able to exchange our ideas and to learn more about each other's projects. So Saventurier, it's like playing on a French word, which is savant, meaning knowledgeable, and aventurier, which means adventurers. So it's a bit like the knowledge explorers, if I can translate. So you have a better understanding of what it means. So it's a program developed by the CRI that designs education through research projects in preschool through high school classes. So it has a wide range of level of different ages. And the purpose of this project is to help participants engage with the world in the thoughtful and meticulous way scientific researchers do. So they learn about research methods and scientific ethics through serious, challenging projects that develop critical thinking, cooperation, and an appetite for exploring the unknown. So basically, we try to put the students, the pupils, or like kids, because as parents, you can also implement the S'aventurier method. So we try to put those students in a position of young researchers. So the S'aventurier program accomplishes 3 different things, like 3 pillars, if I might say. So it designs education through research projects specific to each classroom with scientific mentors assigned to support each project. So if we have a teacher that wants to implement this new method in its classroom, we're in charge of putting that teacher in touch with the scientific. So then this collaboration allows the students to communicate with the teachers that has the knowledge of how to teach, and with the scientific that has the knowledge of its own field. The second pillar is to offer professional development for teachers. So we also help the teachers through different teaching with different trainings. We also created some MOOC. So it's really a way for teachers to get to know more these methods and to be able to implement it in their classes. And the third pillar is to carry out research and development in education. So if I give you some brief key figures, this program involves more than 30,000 pupils into that education through research projects. It's more than 30,000 teachers trained to education through research model. It's more than 400 mentors, researchers that mentor classes. We also produce a lot of online, we also produce a lot of resources that are available online. So it's different tools that teachers or educational community can use. We've also created some MOOC, 9 different MOOC. And it's also more than 30 young researchers conferences that we organized. So if I give you maybe a bit more of a specific insight of one project we carried, there's a clear connection with what Alex presented. So I find it very interesting. It really has this question of how the students, through the education, through research, how they can use this method within their studies, but also as a citizen, as an adult in the professional life. And it aims at developing their critical thinking. So one specific project, for instance, is called the Schools Challenge. And the students were given a challenge that they had 1 year to resolve. It's how to make my city a better place to live. So we really took very specific example of where they live, different problems they could actually see themselves, experience themselves in their everyday life, like transportation problem, like pollution problem, like traffic jam, or like how they actually bring themselves to schools, or like very concrete projects. And they were asked to prototype, to create, to think and to innovate a solution that could make their city a better place to live. And then they had the opportunity to prototype that solution at the Maker Lab that we have at the CRI, and to pitch their idea in front of a panel. So different professionals or employees from the town halls. So they could also we really created that project in collaboration with the city. So we've been asking them, what you as a city employee, what do you do to make your city a better place to live? So the students can actually ask themselves the same question, and you can also work together, and they can see that what they design can have a concrete impact on the city, and it's not only something like too blurry, or that they would not be to implement. And to make sure this project can be realistic.
So you basically are connecting these, let's say, agents, these different kinds of institutions in the world, like city authorities, and offer their challenges to young people to be solved. Is that part of the model, right?
Yeah, exactly. So for instance, we met with a partner working for the city, and the main challenge they had last year was to make sure there were a new metro line arriving into this town. It's north of Paris, and it's a bit excluded of Paris city center. So it's something we shared with the students, and so they worked on the same problem, on, okay, if my city is working on that, how can I also think about that problem and bring my own expertise? Yeah, so I think that was a brief sum up of what we do and how we do it. And the last important maybe point about that project, it's also to make sure the solution they innovated, they created, really fit in the real world. We added a very professional component where they had mentors from the professional world that helped them to build a business plan. So now I have my solution. I prototyped it at the Maker Lab. How can I make sure that's realistic, that's strong enough? How can I ask money for it? How can I sell it? To who and why? So it was really how to manage a project from A to Z.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Fanny. Aakash, I know you are also dealing with, let's say, reshaping of the economy and the emerging new technologies, and I understand part of your a really essential part of your work is helping young people master the skills that will make them adapted for this changing economy, such as digital skills, or we can call it more broadly future-oriented skills, technological skills. But I understand this is a part of the model. So can you share how you see the empowerment of young people, especially because you're based in Bangalore, where it's on the forefront of technological development in India. So you're obviously in touch with all these companies.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I think before I get to the technology part, I think I want to respond to the human aspect of the conversation. And I think what Valentina kind of left at from a youth perspective, talking about youth rights and looking at the youth rights framework also from the perspective of really, she spoke about the right to decision making and representation in different spheres. I do feel that there is this kind of tension between rights and duties, and when we talk about youth rights in the same breath, I think it's also important to speak about youth duties, because when we expect young people to have representation, we also feel, or I think it is also the duty of young people to take leadership in these different processes. If we speak about the right to getting young people trusting and inclusive spaces where they can discover themselves and have a self-realization, it is, I think, equally important for young people to promote fraternity, to promote social harmony by proactively establishing diverse relationships, especially when we spoke about the intersectionality of identities, abilities, ideologies, perspectives, where we can promote harmony and inspire that fraternity while recognizing these intersectionalities. So I do feel that we need to speak about both in the same breath, and not to, that's not a critique, but it's just a reflection and also some of the work that we've been engaged with, and I think to your point, our work at Quest has been twofold. One is to really look at how young people successfully transition from school to work, and how do they have the voice and choice in really choosing what career, what kind of vocation or career path they want to take. And at the same time, I think our other part of our work is to also build networks with like-minded organizations, whether that's civil society, corporate, and government, to be able to really promote the mindset around learning to learn, and to also learning to unlearn and relearn the skills that are needed in the future. So I think two practices that I can share that are probably relevant also from a technology perspective, given we've been given that's kind of the tone of the question that you asked. I think one is especially after lockdown, I think everyone had to pivot to technology based or remote learning models, which had multiple dimensions. I think one, at least learning or insight for me, has been that oftentimes you try to recreate the virtual space exactly like the physical space. So if you were used to doing lessons and sessions online, you'll try to do that in Zoom or in Google Meets, whereas fundamentally the virtual space has certain inherent advantages and characteristics which we need to really exploit for what the virtual space is good at, right? So the virtual space is good for learners to keep trying and keep trying to understand and learn concepts that are otherwise difficult to learn. So the virtual space is non-judgmental. It really allows you to keep doing things at your own pace and time. And so what we see is that what really is a differentiator there is investment in quality of the content as well, and not just the process. So the more the content allows for interactivity, the more the content allows for feedback to get to learners, it really pushes the learner to the next level of challenge that is in line with their capacity. So from our experience, for example, in Quest app, which is a platform we had built about 6 years back, we saw a lot of traffic, almost 100,000 new learners added in the last 7 months. And a lot of that was also because we were pushing through the app for more goal-oriented learning journeys, as opposed to learning concepts the teacher wants learners to learn. So that's where the voice of the learner to choose what they want to learn, the pace at which they want to learn, and the content really supporting that process is critical. And so why we can talk about quicker pivots to digital, I think it also requires a fair amount of investment of time, energy, and effort to get that right. So I think that's something I wanted to highlight when it comes to digital and a lot of what I think some of the other panelists also spoke about, that it may be important for, say, young people to be able to identify problems in their communities, in their families, and be able to, prototype solutions that build that critical thinking mindset, that help build these skills in iteration, in design thinking. I think a lot of people have spoken about that, and that's something that we do focus on quite a bit. I think the piece also around educators and how educators can learn some of their own can change their own mindsets and biases around how to teach, both in a virtual world, as well as how to facilitate career transitions. So we do have online and blended learning programs which really help educators build those skills as well, and build those mindsets as well, especially in the context of vocational education, where that is a critical need, where the importance is not as much on just learning, but also transitioning into the workspace. And so they need to be counselors and educators, in a sense, career counselors and educators. So that's some of the work that we have done with respect to technology. I think I may want to just quickly end with the aspect of that we know that there is maybe a new form of partnerships and new form of kind of networks that are emerging, and that I think is critical from a scale and sustainability lens, that we look at, that the future is in really localization and really looking at strengthening local communities to become more self-sufficient. And I think the critical path to that means that we need to invest in decentralization, creating more open networks for a certain set of stakeholders to converge. Yeah, I just wanted to leave us with that thought as we sort of segue into the next conversation, given that maybe I'll come at the end and maybe some of these conversations may have moved as well. So I just wanted to seed that for what we are kind of talking about in the future, in the next few minutes. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Aakash. And yes, I actually see in this conversation, we are talking about facets of the process that we also seem to be kind of converging upon. So there is some methodology that we all kind of point to on different aspects of it. So in the Google Doc, I drafted what I think is emerging as basically the key 4 aspects of these methodologies, beginning with something that you all underline, is the idea of holding the space for young people, a safe space where they can discuss and operate feeling free and supported. And that space opens up possibilities for deep dialogue and collective sense making by young people, or young people and adults together. The second aspect is, of course, giving a range of skills that will allow young people to really properly operate in this space. And it begins with life skills that many of you were talking about, and also the ability to learn in general, learn, relearn, and unlearn. Then, of course, the idea of future literacy that Kasper was talking about. Maybe it's not as explicit in every project, but I think it's also the underlying motive that we see present. Then many of you are also talking about this research and development as a practice of collaborative thinking on open problems that are still unresolved, that invite this creativity and also some critical thinking, challenging the existing consensus, and of course entrepreneurial skills, that skills that will help people implement this, as Fanny was indicating, making real business plans, for example, not only talking about a fancy future idea, but really something that can be done here and now. And then a really important pillar is having these opportunities for young people to project their ideas into the world, beginning with what Valentina was talking about, the idea of advocating youth rights and opportunities for young people voice. And then building up partnerships with institutions, agencies, local communities, all kinds of real life organizations and networks that can bring real life problems and also help support prototypes further in making them real, making them implementable. And last but not least is preparing groups of people that can work in this empowering way, primarily teachers that are partners of your networks and projects. So this seemed to me like maybe I'm omitting something, maybe there is something important, but it seems to me like there are actually elements of this approach or methodology in each of your projects. And I think all of us in this panel are generally agreeing with the idea that it is desirable, if not mandatory, to engage young people in co-creating the futures. But of course, we also talk that maybe the system around us is not fully prepared for that. And Kaspar, you were also mentioning this idea of liberal illusion, the idea that education alone is able to deal with all kinds of inequalities and lack of transparency in the world that really is not inviting young people to join in. And Sucheta was also talking about dismantling the existing injustice. So in the remaining time, I wanted to invite all of the panelists to share your ideas. How do we, if we want this approach to be propagated, how do we scale it up? How do we bring it into action? How do we make sure that it becomes an element of the emerging system? And what are the key, maybe like one key thing or like a few key things that you would bet upon as a kind of acupuncture point, something that we can begin with to really see this coming up and scaling up?
Yeah.
So we can keep the same order of discussion, but I just invite you to really maybe limit your statements to like 2-3 minutes, so we can have maybe some time for also final reactions. Yes, please.
So since I began, I will begin again. I believe the process of scaling up begins with a point that Aakash made, is that it's all about the process. The depth and authenticity of the process must move at the pace in which youth set for it, and at the pace in which that there is authentic relationships, connections, community that is furthering the futures that they want to see. There is not a one-size-fits-all solution across the globe, even though the challenges are interconnected, and young people need to be designing, weaving those local communities where they are, as well as thematic communities across the globe, yet that in virtual and virtual spaces seems to take less time than I thought it would after this weekend. But it still takes time for friends to create actions and actions to create impact. And that process is an iterative one, an emergent one that is essential to hold with mutual care and deep respect and agency of the young people to determine that pace and the tools and direction of that process. And I don't think, from what I see in the process of weaving with our young people and our youth hosts, that it's going to look like what we've seen before. They've grown up as digital natives with the whole world at their fingertips, seeing the intersectionality of identities. They see what oppression looks like, not just in their world, but across the world. They see what liberation, they know what liberation feels like from their own personal experiences and lack of. And we need to build with that first and connect authentically around those insights from them before we push for a solution that is not yet theirs to create.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Valentina. And I think this is an empowering message of its own. It's actually in the essence. I think if we want to empower, that begins with their presumption. We do empower. We want for a solution. We don't say we use you as a kind of placeholder, as a mask for adults just to take their idea of how the world should be. Precisely. Thank you. Sucheta, you were talking about dismantling, and of course there is a role for both young people and adults in reshaping. So what's your idea of scaling up?
Yeah. Again, fully agree with Valentina that it's really about the process and being willing to allow, not even willing, it's, yeah, just getting out of the way of young people so that they can create the solutions that work for them and is meant for their future. So let me build on that idea then. So when we say get out of the way, that's what I mean. I think there's one part of the process which is empowering young people, giving them the agency, the voice, the ability to create their future, to give us the insights that we saw Valentina already share. And for us then as adults to recognize that there is this systemic pushback is not sitting outside, it's sitting inside of us. So while I create this process for young people, am I willing to go into my narratives about young people, how I might be coming in their way, how is my privilege not letting me listen to them, what is my experience that may potentially color what they want to do and who they want to be. So I fully agree with the process, and there must be a process to allow young people to come up and thrive. And that process must include a much more deepening examination of each one of us also. And what is it that we are holding on to in terms of systems of power and privilege that we need to let go. So the part to scale is to go deep.
Great point. So, and self-reflect. We really, the impediment can be, the hindrances can be in us as adults.
I just want to add one line to this, because I sign under what Sucheta says with my both hands. This reflection and this introspection can lead us to an uncomfortable place, where we need to accept that we don't know. That we don't know something that we, in the first place, wanted to teach to the young people, both in terms of knowledge, skills, or attitude, anything. And especially, of course, this is my sort of take on this, that we don't know what it's going to be like. And we cannot pretend to people that, well, we're using you the really useful things, learn to become a coder and you're made for life. This kind of narrative, or whatever, or even learn reading, which is very liberating, and it's absolutely, literacy is absolutely fundamental globally. But still, we cannot only have this perspective like if we came from the future back and we were telling you, what is going to work, what your life, we're selling promises that we are absolutely not in a position to deliver on. And even if we dedicated our whole life to not forsaking these promises, we would likely fail. So there is, in this introspection, accepting that the ignorance, accepting that we don't know, is a humbling experience, but I think one that gives more trust in many communities. It's not in all the contexts, but in many contexts, it just it just makes you a more trust in terms whether you're talking with the young people or whether you want to tackle it from a systemic perspective. In some contexts, it may make you more trustworthy, I think, because this is more human.
Yeah, I want to add that actually we need to understand what are these safe places or autonomous zones, temporary autonomous zones or permanent zones, which are possible for this working with future, because we are at the frontier actually, and we standing together with the young people against the complex world, which actually do not want to give agency to these young people. We're fighting for this agency, and that's why we need these safe places at the same time places when they are not just defended from the world, they can change it from these safe places. And the literacy is a very good example, but we need more examples of such places when we can do this, actually do this, playing with these changes and make this possible for young people to fight for this in this complex world.
I think that it really connects with what Valentina has been talking about. This advocacy is one of those critical things. Fanny?
Yes, I think what's very important to scale up is also it's a question of working with actors in the field. Like, for example, like very concrete example, but when a teacher from Turkey contacts us to implement a Savanturier project in its class in Turkey, what we ask him or her to do is to get in touch with like a research institute in his own town. So that creates a very positive dynamic wherever you are. And I think that helps to scale up a lot. Another example is like one of the most successful projects in Savanturier. It's called Chimère, and it's a project at the crossroads of art and technology. And this project was imagined and designed by two teachers. So they both have a like very deep knowledge and understanding of what's going on within the classes, within the students. And I think that's what allows a project to be so successful.
Aakash, please.
Yeah, I think actually one thing that I was reflecting on as I was reading the summary, and I think the one dimension perhaps around parents and the role of parents and families in influencing the path for youth. I think that somewhere maybe we may have left that out. So I feel that is just wanted to highlight that as an important part in our conversation, as we've been also learning more and more how that's playing such an important role in this time right now, but also has in the past as well, and we may have not fully sort of looked at that. I think in terms of the scaling up, I think one is definitely the shift from a machine metaphor of linearity to a more living systems metaphor of interconnectedness, and how we think about systems and facilitating the systems to come together to solve complex problems. So I think that's one key shift that I think we feel we are needing to make as we think about scaling, and in that process that there needs to be building on the earlier point of local responses, but also diversity in responses, diversity of people, diversity of ideas, and a large number of organizations that are really networked, who are sharing, sensing, the challenges and really informing each other of what are the ways to be and do both. I think that's definitely critical. I think co-creating models for scale, which also I think take into account the carbon footprint. And I think that's something we touched upon earlier, but I think that's, as organizations being more mindful of that, I think is going to be critical in the process of scaling as well, and changing the narrative of, you know, what it means to lead a good life and to live well in today's time. I think that's equally critical in the times that we are in, and this obviously requires a lot of us to, you know, come out of our comfort zones, create newer identities for ourselves beyond our organizations, beyond the work that we are doing in various spaces, and really figure out how this larger kind of network kind of emerges from the entire system. So that's with an underlying focus on process is the outcome as much. I think that's what I would say.
I'm really excited to see how the conversation is going, and what I think we essentially like the key message, this key message of our panel in this idea of scaling up is that process is the outcome, in a way, and which in the terms of system science, one of my backgrounds is expressed also in the idea that we need to become the system we want to see in the world. And this is the idea of system being. Without us as members of the system, this is not possible. So unless we model this new type of relationship, the empowering relationship, and of course looking into this deep self-exploration, what prevents us from becoming the system we want to see, all else will hardly be possible. Thinking about these very empowering practices, I cannot help but also share with you, like maybe this in the remaining few minutes, I want to give you a bit of a provocation on my side. So in my experience, I've been facing two types of responses from young people. One is that a lot of young people are jumping at the opportunity of really engaged in life and real life problems, and really do something for the world, and they find it very meaningful. Let's say they make a lot of very meaningful contributions. But I also found a really very common different reaction that especially comes from, let's say, young people that come from a more privileged background, young people that, for example, the middle class young people that are just happy with everything that is going on, and they just want to enjoy what they have. They don't see any particular problem in the fact that, for example, they are over-consuming something, because they just enjoy it. So or the fact that they have parents that have been working, let's say, their parts of their body to really get their family to where they are right now. But the next generation is simply saying, okay, we're fine with this. We don't really want to do anything about it. We don't want to be empowered. I wonder if any of you were facing this type of reaction, this so-called, what I can call a lack of desire to take responsibility, a lack of desire to really engage in all these kind of problems with the world, to really lack of desire to step into the shoes of a change maker and just to be where they are, just to, let's say, enjoy the privilege they already have. And if yes, what maybe any of you who had this kind of experience, what is your reaction to it? How do you see? Is this a massive problem? Is this just let's say first world problem? What do we do about it?
I want to recall one of the lessons that our young people shared, and that is anxiety limits creativity. no matter what background, from the most privileged to the least, our youth are suffering from a mental health crisis. I believe this is essential to address if we expect, if we hope, if we enable our young people to take the rights and the duties to lead their education. And if we do not create spaces for healing, for thriving, for well-being, and make that the purpose, as opposed to a secondary or worse part of the process of education, then even the most privileged and well-resourced educations of our young people will not lead to transformation. The anxiety, the mental barriers will get in the way of being able to imagine. And this is what I see from my work in schools in the US, and particularly one school as an educator myself, and in a privileged environment, that belief and cynicism crippled by anxiety is what is the greatest limitation.
Wanted to add briefly that I think that this is not a problem about children and about the youth, that this is kind of a problem for the humanity and for the adults too, that they often feel themselves that it's okay where we are, and that they don't want to become change makers, maybe because they are afraid or because they don't feel just those safe spaces and some support spaces. And that's why it's really important, I think, for the humanity to become responsible adults. And that's why we really need the learning systems to become those supportive spaces for it.
And I think if I were to kind of build on the same premise that I've been talking about, I think young people are really looking at us as role models. And when I'm seeing young people who are not willing to question their privilege, it's a reflection of the adults who are not showing them how to. So for me, it's that is the primary reason why we have inequity, this level of inequity that we're seeing in the world today, because people that have the ability to take decisions and can actually influence education systems, all spaces for young people, are comfortable. It's not impacting them. And that's why they are not willing to put in that investment into their self-reflection to actually change it in a way that it meaningfully impacts the children who are getting left behind, who are marginalized. And I think children from privilege are just learning from that role modeling. And it is us adults who have to change our role modeling around taking accountability for our privilege, going into those uncomfortable conversations, questioning why it's comfortable for me, but it's not comfortable for the rest 80% of the world. We have to show them how to think like that and how to go into that level of self-reflection and discomfort.
Yeah, if I may just add one sentence to this, it's of course a problem sometimes of declared lack of interest in change, but also a latent lack of agency or ownership, just feeling that reality is going on regardless of what we do, and we can just be consuming it. And if we're consuming it at the satisfactory level, then let's just do it. But there is another take on this, half jokingly. It offers a bit of a sort of Central Eastern European perspective, because I co-manage a consultancy that does futures, and I deal with many clients. I sell to many clients, corporate, public. You know, if I spent my life on trying to convince people who are just happy the way things are, and not go and see people who are unhappy about how things are and want to do something harmful or good, because it's not given, you know, people who want to change, people who are not happy with what the world is like, who are not happy with their condition, there's plenty of them. So with all respect to those whom I want to convince, I have a duty towards those who don't need convincing. And I should go out there not to prove myself against the hard cases, but also to go out there and to serve those who can and who want and who will.
I just want to have one point there. I think it's a little bit also about the positioning to young people that I feel, positioning it as if engaging in social change also changes you and is equally the important part, that through that process of change, you start developing a better you start developing the empathy and a point of view to what changes are needed outside. So it's like going outside to change inside. And that positioning oftentimes, we may not end up selling it to them in that way, if I even use that word, because I feel if we sell it right and we can, because in their mind, what's in it for them? And how will it, build them as future leaders or better employees or whatever it may be. I think we need to think a little bit about that as well as we want to sort of drive this point of view.
Thank you very much. A very exciting conversation for me, and the one that probably opens up many more to come. We have been taking notes on this, I think. But my greatest learning is that we really should learn more about each other's work and find ways to collaborate more. You all are great, amazing practitioners. We're doing a lot of impactful work. So thank you very much for doing what you are doing. And I believe that, as you have said, process is the outcome. We need to practice. We need to practice this approach, and I believe that is what is going to invite us into the future co-created. Thank you very much, everyone. I look forward to meeting you in other spaces. Let's not lose connection with each other. We will share the outcome, the Google document, after this meeting. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Pavel. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.